Good morning, everyone. I am Chevy. I'm the clinical administrator currently at the Family Services Clinic over here at Union Square, for those of you who don't know me. We are doing a series for BIPOC Mental Health Month. This is Regan Byrd, so I will let her tell you all about herself and how wonderful she is.
Hi, I am Regan Byrd. I'm an anti-oppression speaker, trainer, activist, consultant, and strategist. And I'm also a woman who has struggled with mental health for the majority of my life. So really excited to talk more about like mental health and my journey. And yeah, excited to be here today.
Sweet. Well, how did you get into the field of mental health and like doing, I know you do like mostly trainings and stuff around anti-oppression,
yes,
which are wonderful. And if you ever have the chance to take one of Regan's workshop, I highly recommend it. But how'd you get into the work?
I would say kind of my journey into the work. When I went to college, I went to University of Denver. I studied public policy and sociology, and there was an emphasis on like I minored in gender studies, and then a lot of my focus in sociology was around racism. So these were things that I was already interested in at the time. I thought I was going to be like a civil rights attorney, and so that was my kind of journey. But then I graduated during the Great Recession. Law school didn't seem like a good idea, so then I went into nonprofit work, and then further kind of developed my understanding of anti-oppression and how oppression kind of shapes societal systems, forces, all of that. And then after the 2016 election, there was a lot more interest in white supremacy and all of that. And I started just doing community trainings, and it kind of expanded from there into Regan Byrd Consulting.
Yeah, it's interesting how like most of us in this work end up like kind of starting somewhere, and then we kind of fall into this work, and then it's like this passion is like driven, and like, what more can I do to like bring awareness to the community? And then you're just like, let me just roll with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's common.
Yeah, you're like, I think I'm gonna be a big shot lawyer, and then you're like, actually, that's not really for me.
Every lawyer I talked to kept being like, okay, figure out what you want to do without being a lawyer, because it's not what you think, and it's more expensive, and it's just so it's interesting about, I think a lot of people, you think you're gonna make change one way, but then you actually, when you're out in the world, you're just like, oh, there's actually all these pathways, and then I can find a pathway that fits more with you know, my talent and my interests, and so I feel like I'm fortunate that I found anti-oppression as being like, this is actually super what I wanted to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think like once you're in the work and you're like actually exposed to like BIPOC communities, and you kind of like really firsthand like see the struggles, like you have your own lived experiences BIPOC, but like seeing it like when you're in the work from a different perspective, like really drives like kind of that passion, like what can I do, like what more can I do, what can I like help like teach people and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's really interesting. I think it's really important like for us to like stand up and speak, but I also think it's like super important to have like allies. So I think it's important to work together as far as like allies and BIPOC community. Like, why do you think that's important, and what can folks who are not in the community do to be like true allies to the community?
Yeah, I do. One of the things I do teach is about allyship and kind of giving people some like guiding principles on how to be effective allies. So I think a couple of things. It's just critical to make sure you're figuring out what actions you can take. So allyship is about action. So what is it you're doing? What is it you're trying to contribute? And that could be money, that could be labor, that could be different kinds of like emotional support. That could be you know, trying to uplift the work, really important, that the work that community is already doing, saying how can I add to this or contribute to that. Right. And making sure you're getting feedback from the communities you're trying to be an ally to. So what are you all looking for? What would be useful or helpful? Sure. So having those conversations and being willing to go where the community wants you to go. And then I would say making sure you're honoring the expertise of the communities that you're trying to be an allyship towards. Because communities, every marginalized community or every community that has done activism, they have, you know, they've been doing stuff and analyzing it for a long time. They have their own resistance movements, things like that. So there pretty much is like, there's nothing new that is, what am I trying to say there? Like there's, it's rare that you are coming in as an ally offering stuff that like hasn't been thought of before, is what I'm trying to say. So, so don't come in and just like, I have the solution. It's just like, no, you're like, I need to learn from you all. I probably know less than you do. So where can I be helpful? What do I need to learn?
Sure.
And finally, making sure that when you're asking questions or soliciting feedback, making sure that there's consent around that process.
Sure.
So, you know, would you be open to answering these questions, or how can I compensate you for the labor in terms of asking you what to do or asking for your support or advice? And then, yeah, like, so don't assume that people want to undergo the labor of telling you what to do. Do some of your own research, but then some people are like, yeah, I'm happy to give you that advice, but know that that's time and energy. So compensate me for that, or what do you have to offer me for asking me that? So I think as an ally, you want to be deferential to the community that you're trying to be an ally towards, and make sure you're honoring their expertise, getting consent for their labor, and trying to contribute in the best way you can.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's like where we get into that, like, intent versus impact.
Yeah.
Where like you may have the best intention, but the impact is not great. And like recognizing that like BIPOC communities generally have a lot of trauma. So like asking them to like rehash out their lived experience without any sort of compensation or even asking is a really dangerous line to walk. And just like, you may mean well, but may not turn out the way you want to. If say there's like a relationship that's not quite built yet in the community, like if there's not really a relationship with the Black community, there's not really a relationship with like the Native American community, what do you think is the best way to start and bridge that relationship as far as like you know, offering help or doing things like land acknowledgement, which has been a huge thing in the last like probably 5 to 10 years. But I think that where organizations really struggle is that they don't have the relationship with the community to even start that. And so what would be like the recommendation on building that relationship?
I would say first thing you want to do is to go into the community. So because sometimes people make the mistake of saying that the community needs to come to me, or they need to put the effort to come here. So you want to go to that community first, and then really you can just begin that conversation by saying, we want to be in relationship with you for these you know, for these reasons. Here's what we're looking to provide you, or here's what we're looking to shift. How does that sound to you? That's where that feedback comes in. And folks shouldn't be shocked or surprised when sometimes folks are like, we're good. We don't need anything from you. Or you know, what we really need is just money. And so if you're coming in for other stuff, like, that's the main thing that we need, and we're doing our own stuff, but we need more you know, financial resources or stuff like that. Obviously a relationship needs to be negotiated, and there needs to be like both parties are like, yeah, I'm looking for this, do you have that to provide, etc. So you want to just start that conversation, and then don't come into the conversation with an expectation about what it's going to be. Try to just be responsive to what the community is saying it needs, and then it kind of evolves from there. So folks are like, we need money, it would be like, okay, here's what we have to offer, or good, now that we know that, we're going to try to access money or increase it this way, or hey, we need more people to show up for this kind of stuff. Okay, we got people for you, so would it be helpful if we showed up here? Really just trying to initiate a conversation about what the relationship could look like, and then again being responsive to what the community is saying it needs. And then as you start doing things, that's where the trust will come. That's where folks will say, yeah, you're reliable, and I know that we have shared values, and we can expect some things from one another. So don't expect trust from the get-go. Once you start doing things with the community, then you can build trust from there.
Right. Yeah. And if like a community says like, nope, we're good, we don't need help. Like, do you think that that's the end of like essentially trying to like get into that community, or you think that it's just like, let's back off for a while and try again later, sort of thing? Like, I think that most folks that are not in the community, they get really nervous when they have to talk to like the BIPOC community as like a white person or not a person in the community, and they're like, I don't know how to talk to them without offending them. And I think that's where a lot of people get really tripped up is I don't understand like why they get so tripped up on the like, how do you talk to them? We'll talk to them like they're human. So but like recommendation wise, when people like get really nervous because they're trying not to offend the community, like what are some pointers there?
I think this is it's really interesting, like as a story example here, like sometimes members of the trans community will talk about you know, somebody will misgender me, but instead of, you know, recognizing it, apologizing, you know, moving on, it becomes the entire thing of the conversation. So it's like, oh my gosh, I messed up, and I'm so sorry, and like, and it's just like, hey, like this becoming the focus about you and how you felt making a mistake. It is a kind of self-centering that you're not aware of. So if it's becoming more about you, about how I want to come across and how I want to sound, and I want to make sure that I'm doing this and this, you really want to actually reorient yourself and say it's more about the community. It's more about what I'm trying to say, or the conversation that we're trying to have together, me trying to support the community. Sure. So you want to actually, you want to focus less on, it's less how I come across and all that, and it's more about me trying to understand them and figure out what they need. You want to be, I'm not saying it's not like you want to have some conscientiousness around your language. You want to come in putting your best foot forward. So practice with other folks, do some research, do all of that. But when you come in, I think people, it's counterintuitive where if you're more concerned about how you're coming across and what you're saying, you're actually not putting the emphasis and the focus on the community. Right. So you want to go in there and say, you know, something, the mindset you can have is, you know, I want to acknowledge that I may mess up and make mistakes. I want to be clear about my positionality. So like, yeah, I'm coming in as a white person from the suburbs, and this is not a community that I've grown up in. You can acknowledge all of that, but then you're really there but like, I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn, and I'm here to provide what I can provide. Yeah. So it's less about me and it's more about you. And when you come in with that mindset, you will be less nervous. You're not thinking of it like I'm here to perform some kind of way. You're there to genuinely have a conversation and figure things out. And again, when you mess up and make a mistake, you know, acknowledge that, repair it, figure out how you can do better next time. And the community, if you're coming in genuinely, vast majority of communities are, they understand that, they're supportive to that. Most of our communities are also trying to be allies to other communities themselves. Exactly. We're all doing this work. We're all trying to practice it. So just make it more about the other folks rather than yourself, and you'll kind of get out of your head with that anxiety and all that. Yeah. And also like DEI and like working with BIPOC communities and any marginalized community, not just BIPOC, this work is ongoing. I think all of us in this work know that. Yeah. Like for someone who's starting out, who's like, you know, I think I want to make a difference, and I think I want to, like, are there any like books or workshops or anything that they can read or take to like kind of like really start and understand that foundation? I know there's like white fragility and all of those types of things, but like if you had to recommend like a couple of things to really just get someone started in understanding this work and why it's important, like what would be your recommendations? Sure. I would say, so yeah, white fragility I think is good. The Ibram X. Kendi books on how to be an anti-racist. And again, these are beginner books. There is Ijeoma Olumo, like Oluo. A lot of her books are good. So she has several ones. And the first one is So You Want to Talk About Race. And then she has another one on white mediocrity. And then, let's see. Tim Wise, I think a lot of his books are good. And he's a white anti-racist activist. Those are the ones that come at the top of my head. So I have other recommendations that are intermediate or advanced, but you're kind of, you want people that can kind of set a foundation for, again, why is this work important and what is this work about? And then your intermediate step should be beginning to more deeply understand the structures and the systems. So that's where you might have a book like The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, or The Color of Law. Richard Rothstein, I think, is the author. So you begin to understand the structure. And then I would say the next level after that, you want to begin to understand like caste systems and colonization. So you're trying to understand how these forces have shaped the entire planet. And then you also want to begin to understand intersectional experiences. So the experiences of Black women, the experiences of Black and brown trans folks, just talking in the realm of racism. And that's going to be kind of your intermediate to advanced. So there's great intro books, and then there's books that are trying to get you to more deeply understand the structures and the systems. And then I feel like because of like the tradition that a lot of Black and browns and Native folks have, there's a lot of barriers in access to mental health care. Like, what do you think are the biggest barriers, and how do we gap like essentially like tradition? So, you know,
you know, as a native Hispanic, you know, you don't go and talk to other people about your problems. You talk to your family. In the Black community, a lot of time it's like you go to the church. How do we gap that, like being able to maintain your tradition, but also accessing like mental health care for you? And then like what is the biggest barriers besides that for a BIPOC community? I know it was like a loaded question.
I'm trying to think of what place to tackle first. So I think I think traditional knowledge and practices, especially rooted in like a lot of these things are rooted in like hundreds of years of kind of practices of philosophy, of like religion. So I think figuring out what does my community have to offer and making sure you're just figuring out the variety. So a lot of times people will think, oh, there's this one thing that my traditional like kind of practices in my community do, and there's almost like there's guaranteed there's more than that. So be like, oh, we do this and there's this, and then you know, how does my community do body work, and how we talked about that, and then what is my community's definition of like mental health? What does that look like, and how have people talked about that? So kind of expose yourself to the range of ideas within your traditional community, and then certain things will probably resonate with you. You'll be like, that sounds right, or feels right, or that's my experience. You may even start with people who share a lot of your important identities. So so as a Black woman, I think a lot of the things Black women have had to say about mental health, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. For folks who folks might be like, I want to understand how working class people have thought about this, or I want to understand again how trans folks and gender nonconforming folks have thought about this. So what identities are important to you? You might seek out people in your community that share those identities, and what have they had to say? So in terms of accessing tradition, there's a lot of like wisdom and knowledge there that you can pull from. And then in terms of, you know, what I would say is like kind of traditional European therapeutic mental health practices, some of those may work for you too, and you want to kind of seek those out. So I didn't have a lot of success with cognitive behavioral therapy. What I was looking for was someone who can understand how my mental health is impacted by oppression and the society I'm living in. So I sought out folks that had more expertise on that, and were able to like have a trauma-informed response to mental health. So just try out different counselors. Say, do folks have folks who specialize in this area, and then figure out kind of what works for you there. And I think all of us are really trying to critique and basically decolonize our understanding of what therapy and mental health and all of that look like. That is a really interesting journey. That to me is like a lifelong journey about you're pulling apart pieces about what is happiness, what is success, where did these ideas come from, who am I trying to be and why, and what does that even mean? So pulling out those threads takes a while, but your community and a good counselor can support you with that analysis. And then that's where you may then want to have other folks who are doing that same journey to talk through some of those things with. Maybe that's your family, but it might be another community that you're seeking out that is also trying to think about those things.
And you mentioned something that you just said, like a good counselor, and we know that like most counselors or therapists or people are white in this work, and so a lot of our community and folks are going to say, I want someone who looks like me. We know it's possible, but like, what's the best way for like a white therapist to connect with like a marginalized community, like somebody who's not in that community? Like, so like what's the best way to connect and like really like start that therapeutic like relationship with them?
I think and then going back to like a barrier, like it is a barrier for a lot of people to find affordable mental health services, or services where they're just like, I want someone who, if they don't share my identity, understands how to analyze things with my identity in mind. So I think for a white therapist supporting the BIPOC community, like you have to, there's actually a methodology that I've trained on that I'm not an expert in it, but basically rather than saying like this is an identity neutral space, you actually want to bring identity into the space and say, so this is my identity, these are some of the things that I've been taught, or these are some of the things that I've learned as a white person. Like this may differ from some of your experiences, but let's talk about that in the actual counseling session. Or you can basically the idea is broaching. You're broaching identity, and you're trying to say, this is my understanding of how systems and structures, because anybody can learn that and understand that. This is my idea about how systems and structures might be influencing you. How does that sound to you? And again, it's a negotiation, it's a conversation. Any therapist like can do some basic training and education to kind of have an idea. Okay, gender roles and gender role expectations, that shapes us, and ideas about race and people's capabilities based on race, which is a big part of racism, that has shaped us. So I can kind of bring that up in a counseling session, regardless of my identities, and say, like, let's try to think about this from this meta standpoint, or from the society we live in, and then let's break it down to how might that be influencing this. So with a gender example, one example is, you know, I'm kind of exhausted and I'm frustrated as a woman because I have to do all of these like childcare tasks and cleaning tasks. And it's like, yeah, let's talk about that in terms of how you can have a conversation with your partner. Let's talk about that in terms of how you can support your self-care. But let's also talk about sexism. And let's talk about expectations around women to do a lot of that. That's the best kind of counselor that can say there are several ways we can tackle this. Let's try to hit on all of these, and then let's see what changes once you have a conversation with your partner, and once you do some self-care routines, and once you start to think about, oh, lots of women have had these experiences. Maybe I want to go talk to other women about that. Maybe that's an additional conversation I want to have with my partner, not just about can you pick up more of the slack, but also, hey, your expectations of me are a bit are flawed due to sexism. So learn that. You need to do active education around that as a counselor. Folks like me can teach you that. So again, Regan Byrd Consulting, doing trainings with me, and I do training specifically for mental health providers and things like that. But lots of folks are focused on exactly that. Anything that talks about decolonizing therapy, anything that talks about anti-oppression in therapy, these are folks that are trying to give you the tools and the skills to do that.
So essentially we're like not shying away from race. Like anyone can see that you're white. And so let's just like put it out there. And then let's move forward with the work and how I can like support you in your treatment goals, whatever those may be.
Absolutely.
And really addressing like the systemic oppression that most marginalized communities have experienced. And just recognizing that. That was really great. That was really great. I loved it. I love the like drop of like Regan Byrd Consulting.
Because I'm just like, I definitely do this work, and I know that there are other folks that do this work. So there may not be awareness about, because I think a lot of times people are like, well, where do I go to even like get trained on this or figure it out? And there's a lot of it's word of mouth or things like this, where people get exposed to consultants who are doing this kind of work. And just going back to my personal journey, too, as an example with racism. So, you know, as a Black person living in Colorado, specifically Black women, this is actually an intersectional thing with Black women, like dating and romantic relationships. Black women are kind of at the, considered one of the least desirable partners by a lot of people. And we have a harder time finding relationships, or finding, or long-term relationships. We're less likely to get married, things like that, if that's something folks are interested in. And so me coming in and saying like, hey, I'm having some depression, I'm having some negative self-talk about this, like feeling like I'm undesirable, things like that. A counselor being able to work with me to talk about, so let's talk about how you can not internalize that, but let's also talk about the reality of Black women's experiences and the community that you're in and all these things. You are also facing some, you know, structural and interpersonal dynamics that are affecting that. So that you understanding that and learning about that, that can also help you not internalize this. Like a lot of people are just like, there's something flawed with me. And I'm like, there may be things you need to work on, certainly, but if you, there are lots of people with certain racial identities that may find it harder to find partners, either given where they live or just because of racism and how they're looked at. And yeah, knowing that and being able to talk through that, it's a part of fully understanding the problem, and therefore fully understanding the solutions, fully understanding how you can resist it as an individual. So that's another example with race that I'm like, I need and want to be able to talk to a counselor who understands that level of this, and doesn't just say this is only individual, and so let's only talk about individual solutions.
Like it's more than just the more than interpersonal. Like this is bigger than that. Okay. And so I know we're ending BIPOC mental health. why do you think it's important to celebrate BIPOC Mental Health Month? And why do you think it's important for organizations to recognize BIPOC Mental Health Month?
First, I think it's important to celebrate Mental Health Month because, you know, these things are harmful to us, like experiencing racism, experiencing sexism, experiencing transphobia, experiencing classism. These things do wither away at your mental health. These are real things that are critical to understand, and then again to be able to resist and support yourself. So specifically for BIPOC folks, you know, living in a country that is structurally racist, you are going to have mental health impacts from that. So number one, recognizing that is important and letting people know you're not alone. Like all of us are kind of dealing with it. It's really important to recognize that and then celebrate the resistance against that. Celebrate, hey, we are focused on radical self-care. We are focused on you living a good life and thriving. And here's how you can do that. And support yourself even within this system. So we're celebrating kind of the long history and the long traditions and the efforts done in that vein. And then it's important for the second question was, why is it important for organizations
to recognize? Yeah,
it's important for organizations just to understand that you know, there are unique mental health challenges with the BIPOC community, and therefore you have to kind of recognize that if you care about mental health, if you care about wellness, if you care about harm reduction, this is something that you should be attentive to. And then also understanding that there are unique things around mental health going on with the BIPOC community. So it's important for your organization to recognize that, because this is a population that your organization, the BIPOC community, is either interacting with, serving, they're on your staff. You know, these are folks that are a part of what your organization is trying to is a part of like your mission, or what your organization is trying, community your organization is trying to interact with. So you having awareness and attention to that is important for you doing your best work as an organization, and is important for that thing we were talking about earlier, building those relationships, building those connections, and being able to serve the community you're trying to serve in the best way possible.
Perfect. Yeah. And I had a question and then it just like ran away. So I mean, all of us that have been in this work for a long time know that DEI isn't anything new.
Yeah.
But it's just really come to the forefront, like in the last, like probably like really bigly, like in the pandemic.
Yes.
I think is where it got like huge.
Yeah.
And now everybody's talking about it. So folks are talking about like DEI hires.
Yeah.
And performative, like just checking the box of performative measures. What is the best way for like an organization to avoid just doing the DEI hires and like checking that box? Because I think it's beyond like opening up your hiring structure to like welcome in marginalized communities, but it's a whole different game to then say, yep, we've hired you and now we're supporting our marginalized community staff.
Right.
And so like, how do they avoid like not just doing the like DEI hire with the check mark?
I think it's important. I have something, a model that I talk about in my trainings called the cycle of anti-oppressive practice. So the first thing I talk about there is values. And I say you have to have a values foundation of doing this work. So this work is, even though it can and does make people more money to have diverse and a robust staff, it's not about making more money. It is about harm reduction. It's about being anti-oppressive. So you have to be aware you are living in a society where oppression is present. I don't want to, not only do I not want to contribute to that, I want to be a part of the folks helping to dismantle that and create new systems. DEI is an organizational tool set for doing that. So you need to have the right values foundation for doing this work. What does your organization care about? If at the end of the day, all your organization cares about is money, that's what's going to drive your decision making. So there needs to be a deep, you know, conversation and reconciliation around values at your organization. What values are driving our DEI work? Then you have to get some training and education on what anti-oppressive DEI is. Not all of us who do DEI work do it from this anti-oppressive lens, but I feel like that's the right root and the right foundation. Why aren't organizations already diverse, already inclusive, already equitable? Why isn't our society already all of those things? The answer is oppression. So you got to understand those dynamics. Then you have to translate that into practice. And not only do we need to think about like hiring practices, but we need to think about our organizational structures, decision making, employee resources like salaries and retirement, team building, We got to think about employee like onboarding. Once folks get hired, how we onboard folks, employee exit interviews when folks leave. There's a list of 13 organizational areas I have that touch on all of these things. And I say all of these areas have to be taken through a DEI lens. Why are we trying to do this? Are we trying to do this because it's a trend, or we actually care about harm in our community and stopping harm in our community, you know, inside our organization, employees and all that, and outside our organization in terms of what we're actually trying to do in the community. Once you have that foundation, then it's just about learning and practicing and evaluating, and then you will get better at it. But it takes many, many years to actually take your entire organization through that lens. And so you really got to be like, hey, we're in this for like the 10 or 15 year commitment that it's going to take to really do that. But then once you do it, then it's much easier to maintain it and just continue to make revisions and adjustments as you're doing it. So that's really what the work is. And we are in the middle of a DEI backlash right now, and folks are pulling away. Well, this is controversial, and this is this. Anti-oppression has always been controversial. And again, that's where I go back to, you may not have actually cared about this in the way you thought you did if you're already willing to pull back due to pushback. Like, people are suffering, people are dying, people are being tortured, all the way into people are experiencing psychological harm from the environments that they're in. That is the foundation. That's what I need you to care about first. And then I can work you up to, well, what does this mean in terms of our conflict policy? Or what does this mean in terms of how we hire folks? There's the root of the work, and then it goes all the way up into, how do I change my organization? And so if you have the ability to do that yourself, do it. If you need third-party consultants and things like that to do it, do that. And then make sure your organization understands why you're doing it, and that this is a strategic journey that you're on. Yeah.
And I heard a really good quote the other day that was pretty much like, a lot of like folks will say they're allies, but they're only allies until they're comfortable. Once they become uncomfortable, then they're like not allies. So I think that like really sums up like exactly what you just said, that like people are uncomfortable talking about anti-oppression and anti-racism, and it's like, yeah, well, it's not a comfortable conversation. And it shouldn't be. And I had seen something else that was pretty much just like, we can't move forward until we admit that like the structure and the systems of the United States have always been based in racism, always been based in oppression. And until we admit that, we can't really ever heal. So that's why this work is like so ongoing and keeps going, just because of things like that. So yeah. Is there anything else that you think is important for like somebody watching to know or consider in our little chat this morning? Well, like kind of like take it away from the structure of questions and kind of let you roll with it for a little bit if you'd like.
So yeah, we are recording this end of July, beginning of August, and 2024. And so even for future folks who are watching this, but this moment right now, you know, we're experiencing a moment where, again, there's this backlash against DEI. People are, it's similar to, it's almost exactly the same as the attack on wokeness, as the attack on CRT. Before that, it was affirmative action. Before that, it was political correctness. It's the exact same thing. But people, first of all, saying that, you know, dismissing the work, not understanding the foundations of the work, saying it's nonsensical, things like that, but also attacking people. Like, so Kamala Harris being called a DEI presidential candidate, and it's meant to be a disparaging attack. You don't actually have any talent. You don't actually have any skill. The only reason you matter is because of your identity. That's not what this work is about. It's about, this work is really deeply about looking at structures and systems and how they have harmed communities of people. So entire communities have been harmed. The Black community, the Indigenous community, the Asian community, the Mestizics, and that's the racial group that people use the term like Latino, Hispanic. So the actual racial group we're talking about there is Mestizics folks, etc. These are folks that have been harmed by racism, by colonization. We're trying to, number one, repair the harm that has already been done, because there has been nothing that has really even addressed like the hundreds of years of political, economic, and social harm that has happened to these communities. So we're trying to repair that harm. We're also trying to fix the current system so that this harm is not possible again. It is very important work. It is rooted in in facts, in history. Racism is objective. It's not the opinion that racism has happened. Yeah. You're like, it's your opinion racism has happened, it's my opinion racism hasn't happened, and we cancel each other out. No, unfortunately, no. Like, there's independently verifiable information about how these things have occurred in our society. And that's what this work is deeply about, repairing harm and reforming structures and systems so that they are truly equitable, so that they are truly based on merit and skill and interest. We don't have that now. And if you don't understand how we don't have that now, you need more training. If you do understand how we have that now, then you need to be participating in the repair and the creation of new systems. So, so I want folks to really kind of be like, how much do I know about this work? There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where if you don't know something about a subject, you think there is nothing to know. And so you're just like, yeah, I know about this. It's just this simple thing. And once you start to learn things, you're like, oh, there's so much to know about this. I actually don't know a whole lot. Then when you start to learn even more, then you're like, okay, I know a decent amount and I still know there's a lot more to learn. So ask yourself, how much have I really invested in my own education? How much do I really know about this? And let me start there. People have really strong opinions about this work and they don't know anything about it. So continue doing your education on DEI. That's training, that's reading books, that is, even, TikToks, YouTube, hear from different generations of people and expose yourself to this work in different ways. And then once you feel like you are starting to understand it, then you want to start to move into that allyship practice piece, and start trying to change the places that you have investment in. Start with there. Start with your workplace, start in your home, start in places you shop, places of worship. That's really what we're all being asked to do. You're not being asked to save the entire world. It is a big and enormous system, but you're being asked to say, learn for yourself, chat with other folks about your learning and expand your learning, and then try to change the places that you are at. Yeah. And if we all did that, we would have such a massive movement towards transforming the United States. So that's what I want to remind folks is I want to remind folks that we are in a period of backlash, and the work always goes like this. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. You need to be committed to the work regardless of where we are in that cycle. So it's unfortunate that we're in that cycle, but we are that you are part of the resistance against that cycle of this backlash against DEI and trying to delegitimize it. We've been here before, we will go there again, but your commitment needs to be solid and foundational. And so make sure you have that foundation, and then try to make sure your organization has that foundation. Again, other places that you are invested, and that's really what the work is about.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, that was amazing. That was great. I'm sure we could sit here all day and talk about these things.
Absolutely.
But that was amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Regan. I appreciate that. And that's it.
And thank you.